So welcome this morning, folks. Happy Friday, happy spring. Welcome to Citizen Collective Citizen Spotlight Call with Smart School Councils. I am very excited about this one. This is one of the initiatives that I am the biggest fan of in the world. I just want to say a quick word before we get started about Citizen Collective. So Citizen Collective is an experiment in trying to bring together a whole range of people who are doing face-to-face, what we're calling face-to-face, face-to-place work. People who are trying to build this citizen future where they live in the places they live and love. And if you're keen to be part of that, then come and join. The nature of these spotlight calls is we're as they sound, we're putting the spotlight on one initiative and getting to understand it. It's something that speaks to this idea of a citizen future, a future where the logic that we're building from is the idea that all of us are smarter than any of us, that tapping into the ideas and energy and resources of everyone is how we're going to create the better future. And if you haven't heard me say something like that before, then where have you been? My name's John Alexander. I wrote a book called Citizens, and I basically say that sentence a lot. And without further ado, let's talk Smart School Councils. So as I say, super excited, as you may be able to tell. And the way I want to start is, so Greg Sanderson is, I don't know why I'm pointing like that. He's kind of there. He might be up above me for all I know on your screens. Greg is the founder and CEO of Smart School Councils. Rachel, the wonderful Rachel Gray, is a teacher who is using Smart School Councils. And so I want to start with Rachel, actually, and just tell us from your perspective, like, what is it? How does it work? How are you using it? Like, introduce Smart School Councils, Miss Gray.
Okie dokie. Hello, everybody. I'm going to join John in the enthusiasm because I do feel like this is it's the most amazing thing to be part of. And we feel really privileged that we found Smart School Councils. So I think that's the whole thing. We just want to get that message out to everybody. So having been a teacher for quite a long time, in the past, before we kind of joined Smart School Councils, the school councils tended to always be, one child from kind of Key Stage 2 who was the council leader, and it would be very much, lip service, really. You'd have your council meetings, there'd be children whose voices probably weren't really ever heard, even children in the meetings, and it was very much my experience in a few different schools, that it was very much the teacher's agenda, whoever was leading school council. And actually, when you look at changing things, I don't feel that there was really a big impact. So for me, Smart School Councils has completely changed all of that. Every single student in our school and everybody on the staff are part of our school council, and every single pupil has the opportunity to share their voice. We do have a communication team, but which meet with me every Thursday afternoon after school, but they're involved with the day-to-day of the school so much. It's everybody right from early years all the way up to year 6. We have some lovely year 6 ambassadors who go down to early years to speak with the younger ones. And the way that it works is that everybody, Monday to Friday, everybody's involved. It's not just something you do once, for half an hour. It looks like assemblies, it looks like conversations in class. One of the biggest things for me is our class meetings. So every single Thursday, we allocate half an hour to every classroom. We don't go into the assembly hall, and you have your class meeting. And basically, 2 different children run the class meeting every week. They completely run it. And I know Greg came into our school to kind of see how it was working, and right the way down, even in early years, we do it a slightly different setup in early years, but those children are, the people at the front of the room, the people kind of monitoring behaviour, encouraging oracy, making sure that everybody's listening, looking. And the debates can be quite intense, quite passionate. I must say, I'm there a little bit sometimes with the order, but they're very good at regulating that. And as they move through the school, there's just this real attention of active learning, active listening, sorry, that the children are giving to each other, and they're actually responding based on what someone else has said and considering that rather than just waiting to speak, if that makes sense. So it could be anything. You know, recently we had a question about sleep, how important is sleep? And that kind of came from some of our healthy skills work that we were doing. We have things like, we'd noticed a bit of an issue with the girls not going in the ball court. And so we had a question on there. Do you think that there needs to be a girls only day in the ball court? Obviously girls are welcome any day, but do we really need to have that positive bias on that day of like, we're going to invite all the girls in? And the conversation was just unbelievable. You know, you had year 2 children, 7 years old, 6 years old, and the way they could kind of discuss it, a lot of the children would say, well, I don't think that's fair, and they had that kind of open floor to just speak their minds. We have questions like, what would you like to wear for World Book Day? And we absolutely stick to that as a staff. So we have to give it to the children because it is their school council and it's their school. It's not our school. Like, we're just lucky to work here, you know. It's their school experience. And when they say something, we have got to listen. And I think another side of this is we're a rights respecting school. And when you look at children's rights and moving forward people's rights, that being able to kind of advocate for yourself and others, being able to be heard, you know, there are so many articles in the rights to children that speak about listening to children, having a voice, but then it's the action. And I think Smart School Council gives us that platform to hear. And then you do need an SLT who's going to back you, and you need parents as well who are going to get on board with that. So it's not something that you can just do in your classroom and leave. It's got to be in your culture. Another thing I'll just share with you, obviously class meetings are really important, and the communication team will come together, we'll assess, we'll look at things. I mean, sometimes we have things like, what superpower would you have if you were a superhero? So sometimes we have that lightness, that fun, you know, and sometimes it's really hard hitting questions. You know, when all of the riots were going on, we had some real conversations about, can we understand why people are doing this? Can we understand where this is coming from? Do we agree with it? And all of those questions for a 6-year-old, 11-year-old, 5-year-old, to that be put in child speak and be able to give their view, that's the empowerment we want for them to take on into their lives.
So can I ask Rachel,
another sorry.
Another thing, there's so many things. I love it.
So many things. I'm sorry, John.
No, don't apologise. I love it. I mean, firstly, I want to know, my first very brief follow-up question is, where is the school that you teach at, and how can I move there and put my children into it? Where are you?
So we're in Gateshead, we're in Lowfell. I'm actually a Mackham, I'm Sunderland, but pretty much we're right in, like, pretty much everybody's a Geordie, you know.
Nice. Okay.
So yeah, there was a lot of celebrations after last weekend.
Very good.
Just to give you a little bit of insight, we are in a very affluent kind of pocket, and the reason I'll say pocket is because our kind of surrounding areas are very diverse, and there's a lot of deprivation like on your doorstep, but sometimes these children don't really see that, or they don't experience that as much as other children. And I think that's our job as well, to like widen and broaden and make sure that it's always kind of like they look at the world as a window as well. So there's people looking in, but they've got to look out, they've got to be and this helps us.
Sorry, can I zoom you in a little bit on that moment around the riots then, because that sounds fascinating. Because arguably that conversation, we didn't have that conversation as a country, actually.
No.
That you had in the school. So just walking through it a little step by step. So who made the decision that would be discussed in the class meetings? Where did that come from?
The way that we do it, we work, and Greg knows this, we did a little bit of training with picture news. So we try and pull all of the like best things and get them all together. So picture news, if nobody's familiar with it, it's basically everything current, everything that's going on in the world, but it is in in images and in child-friendly images as far as possible.
Got you.
There are assemblies, there are a lot of different resources that you can use. You can use them for lessons, you can use them for discussion, you can use them just as, you know, something in the background to kind of get the conversation going. So Picture News always do release things. So we did use it from Picture News, and we kind of used it for our class meeting then. So we discussed it in assembly as a whole. Mrs.
And that was the decision of you as a teacher, or the SLT?
So
Or...
Mrs. Swinbank, the head, did the whole school assembly, and we did talk about it, because I think what's really something that we are really clear about is you can't kind of say, oh, well, it doesn't happen at our school, or it doesn't. You can never say that about anything. And a lot of our children have older siblings, people in their family, people who potentially would have gone down there and got involved in some way, not just at the news. Like, I mean, I'm a parent, and I don't often let my kids watch the news because I want them to hear it from a non-biased side. So I think in school it's giving information and allowing them to make their own choices and decisions, and not giving them the narrative, because they're really intelligent, they know what's going on. So when Rachel introduced sorry, go on. When Rachel introduced the Picture News in assembly with the riots, we then took it into classrooms then. So then that meant that happened on the Monday, and we were upset because a lot of the places where we lived had been close to us, had been, you know, and there was people going out, and we kind of swung the narrative and looked at the community and the cleanup. And we looked at the images of the people cleaning up, and we went round them. And what was really impactful was there was just people from every race and religion. And we kind of used our little magic pen on our whiteboard and circled someone and said, what do you think their story is? What do you think? Why do you think they're cleaning up? What does it mean to them? And just bringing it back to the person, you know, and not looking at that as a mob or do you know what I mean? So,
and can I just ask? So so you have the assembly. The assembly was on like the Monday, at the beginning of the week.
Monday, yeah, because it had all gone on over the weekend.
And then, so that was this, yes, of course. And then the Thursday is the class meetings.
Yeah.
And so, and the class meetings, so as I understand, from what I've understood, and maybe we'll start to bring Greg in a moment, but the class meetings have a specific question at the heart of them. Is that right? So
yeah.
What was the question?
So the question was literally, as I say, we swung it back to the cleanup, and we said, I think it was, what do you feel about the people the cleanup effort? And then there'll be 3 options that we kind of give them. We always try and be a little bit divisive and have, you know, a bit of a, whoa, I wouldn't have picked that one, but we'll put it in there. And something we do that you get actually 5 options you can have. So we'll usually have 3 options, and then the 4th one will be other. Share your ideas and the stuff that the kids give you, and we type it all in, and then we look at it as the communication team and say, like, what is this saying to us? And now we feed it back to the children as well. So every half term, at the end of half term, we do an assembly of, we asked, you said, this was the action.
And zooming in on that one, do you? I mean, this is hard to ask you because it was last summer, right? But do you remember what the 3 things were, just to give us a feel?
So I think it was something like that. So it was about the cleanup effort. So it was about, any good citizen would do this. So this is just what should be expected of you. It was about, this person's really done something great, as in that's out of the ordinary. So that's not expected of you. They've gone over and above. And then it's, oh, well, I think the council should clean that up because they didn't make that mess. And then obviously the other, and in the other, we got a lot of comments about how it's everybody's mess, because there's a reason that people have done this, and we might not agree with it, but actually, and it's the same, we linked it to tidying up the classroom, you know, like if everybody said, oh, well, I didn't drop that piece of paper. So it was very much looking at that whole, exactly what you're talking about, getting together and being a collection of people who want the same things and who aspire to the same things. So actually we're going to pull together, and you don't have to have exactly the same opinions, but you can actually agree on this.
And that structure of having some clear options that allow grouping, and then another to be able to. I'm gonna bring you in, Greg, and firstly to bring some tranquility to people's Friday mornings, because the combination of me and I'm teasing Greg. Greg and I have been talking for a while, and I keep teasing him that he needs to sell this thing so much harder because it's just so incredible. But so that's why I'm teasing. But he knows I love him deeply as well. But Greg, just like give us step back a little bit from the immediate. So we've got this sense of a school that's really embracing this, a primary school right down to early years, kids as young as 4, running their own class meetings on a Thursday. The assembly sort of maybe sets in Rachel's school, assembly sort of setting the tone for the week, and then the class meetings giving every kid a chance to be part of the conversation, running their own class meetings, and being able to kind of aggregate that and feed that back and take some decisions together. Like just give us a bit more of the frame of like what actually is Smart School Councils in this. What are you putting into that school? What are you offering them that enables that? And what is it that magical humans like Rachel are then doing? Like how do those two things come together?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I need to sell it too much when you've got people like Rachel in the room. It does it much better than me. But I appreciate all the energy and support in the room. So thank you. I think there's probably three things that we help schools like Rachel's with, and the first one is just maybe encouraging them to stop a little bit and think, how well is your system working at the moment? So in Rachel's school, there's nobody in Rachel's school whose voice isn't important. Every young person's voice in her school, and I would argue every school in our country is important. And like I said, the first thing I think we're offering is trying to say, well, actually, how well does your current system of a kind of weird like Westminster model of a school council that we're kind of transplanting into your school, how well is it helping everybody to get heard? And the answer is I don't think it will be doing a very good job of that. I think the second thing we then offer is trying to remind schools that it's possible to get everybody involved. Like everybody's voice is important. That's what a democracy is. Not that we all agree with each other, not that we all have to kind of not have the occasional argument or discussion, but actually, like, let's try and get everybody involved. And then I think the third thing that we help with is just really that with that belief, just trying to help schools to make it easy and practicable, because schools are so busy and time poor. And no matter how much you agree with the idea that everybody's voice should be involved, and even if you think that's a great idea, it just needs to be easy because schools are so busy. And this isn't the only thing that Rachel's doing. It's doing other stuff too. There's lots on character development, and of course, she's a teacher, and that's common in a lot of schools, right? People are wearing a lot of hats, and where we've come in is to try and, with that last piece, just try and make it easy.
So tell us a bit more. So at the heart of this, there's a software platform, right? That's the sort of core of it. Tell us a bit more about that. And that's primarily focused on those class meetings. Am I right?
Yeah, that's the main thing it helps with. So I guess taking that idea and saying, well, how do we help every class in a school take part in a meeting? And I think like we touched on, it's basically you pick a question, right? Because classes have they don't want a big long meeting. They want a short, snappy 10 or 15 minutes each week, like Rachel's talked about. And what the platform does is to help our schools pick what question that might be. Initially, they need a bit of help. Sometimes they're not sure what to ask. It's quite a big thing to encourage a discussion across like every pupil in the school. So we have a bank of about 2,000 questions that we help with. I've got an amazing teacher on my team who writes new questions every week, trying to explain what's going on in the world, which is it's just quite difficult sometimes, especially to kind of translate to younger pupils. And the platform helps to place that question in a tool, which is like a kind of almost like a sort of fancy PowerPoint slides, which supports kids, I guess, from the age of like 5 and up to run their own meeting without any, hopefully, but maybe with a little bit sometimes if they're very young, but without any help from an adult. And over time, we can see pupils doing it themselves and teachers really stepping back. Yeah.
Lovely. And just the quick question, just drawing from the chat, that Rachel's you're a primary school teacher, right, Rachel, as well?
Yeah.
Obviously we've talked. Does this work in secondary schools as well, or is it harder there, or do you focus only on primary?
No, we work in all types of schools. So we have, it's mostly primaries we work with, but then there's lots more primaries, isn't there? There's about sort of there's a good few more. So we've got loads of secondaries we work with. Particularly they're keen on because they have tutor time. It works quite well often that they can have a debate each week in tutor time about either that's something going on in the world or something that they want to change in school. But then also about 30% of our membership. So we work with about 600 schools.
600 schools?
Yes.
Say it loud, Greg.
600 schools.
Very good.
Thank you, John. You're such a champion for us. It's so nice. So nice.
Don't thank me. Focus on the thing.
Sorry. 30% of schools are either special schools or pupil referral units. So
30% of your schools are
yeah, it's such a big percentage, and I'm very proud of that because these are young
and
people.
what percentage of total schools are special, are SEN or pupil referral, like in the universe? So
I think it's about 10%.
So you're massively overrepresented, and that's because. Why do you think that is? Like, what do you hear from that?
I think it's very front of mind. If you work in an SEN setting or a pupil referral unit, which is for young people who aren't in mainstream or they can't work in mainstream setting. I think if you work in those settings, it's very front of mind about the voice of young people, and it's very front of mind how important that is, maybe more so than mainstream. And so any way that schools can support young people to build up their voice, to be able to speak up and understand what's going on in the world and share what they have to say, and also listen to each other as well, I think is important. So that's the kind of thing we hear from teachers in those settings. They're amazing.
Great. I think we're about and people can visit the website. We'll pop the URL for the website in the chat. There's a few demo videos and so forth on the site. But I want to kind of step back a little bit and understand where this sort of first came from. I'm actually going to quickly ask Rachel, like, how did you first encounter this? Like, it was so
our current head, she's also called Rachel. She was at the time, she was deputy, and it was just as I'd joined the school, so it was about 6 years ago, I think, was it, Greg? And basically Rachel had heard about it, and she kind of looked through it, and again, our school is very much, we align our thinking with Greg, and we're very similar, so it was just something that really felt like it ticked all the boxes in terms of and I think over the years we've seen, obviously, just to say, the interface that they use is just amazing. Like the platform is fantastic, and in all of the years that we've done this, there's never been a glitch with it. I think there was one little thing where and it was to do with it. It was internet, something about the permissions. Apart from that, we've had nothing. As someone who sets the questions, it's so easy, and I think that's where it came from. So when we discovered it, we started doing it, and over COVID, it was amazing because obviously we weren't able to meet in the traditional way, and we actually used to. This is really bizarre. I don't know if Greg knew that we did this. We used to link our class meetings, so we'd have one person walk through the hall, and we would do a live feed. So we would go from class to class to class. The old head would run around the 3-story school to show everybody in their class meeting so that you could get the feel that we're all doing this, like everybody's doing
Lovely.
it. It's not, and from COVID, we just embraced it, and there's so much more to it than just the class meetings.
No, Greg, can I come to you and just give us a sense of the sort of founding of it. Like, why did you do this in the first place? Like, where did this come from in your crazy brain?
Good question. I guess a few things happened to me that made me sort of feel so passionately about this stuff. So I grew up pretty working class background. I come from not too far. I was born not too far from where Rachel School is, in the northeast of England. We moved around a lot, but I went to like a top uni. I did all right at school, and then went to a top uni, and really kind of saw a big difference in. I studied politics. I saw a really big difference in the kind of state school kids in those seminars and stuff who really sort of sat and listened and expected like people to kind of talk to them, and like privately educated peers who were very much more confident and very much more like stand up and lead, like this is what we're talking about. And I was a bit like, there's something wrong with me here. Like I couldn't quite grasp what was going on. Um, and I think that really stuck with me. Sort of, as you go through uni, you sort of realize, well, actually, there wasn't much of a difference in ability or skill. It's just that the ability to kind of stand up and share an idea confidently is so important. And actually, I don't know, it just really helps you. So then, like fast forward, I worked for the last Labour government in policy, and I would go around hundreds of schools working on like citizenship and RE policy and PSHE, and I would see the pupils whose voices were invited in to have a say were always a small group of students for a start, but most often a small group of the more able, more confident students. And like it struck me as there's something's wrong there if we're creating systems in schools which only really invite a tiny minority of our schools to have a say, especially when those voices that are involved are typically, yeah, they get better grades and they're from families that are a bit
Yeah.
richer. And so I guess that's why I talk about this sort of weird, like transplanting a weird, like Westminster system. Like, I, d I don't think that works. And I don't think just taking a few voices and really giving them all the skills is what a school should be doing. I think democracy is much more important and much more inclusive than that. So yeah,
And
that's
you
why
start,
that's
yeah,
why I
no, I
walk
love
you
it.
through it.
And I think for me, just to reflect for me, like it's not what a school should be like. It's not what a country should be like. And I hadn't this conversation about the riots. I didn't know that before we came on this call, and Rachel just went there. But imagine if we'd had that been able to have that kind of conversation across the country. And I think, and so thank you for that sharing that sort of founding initiative. And I believe you started it just as like a Google Doc or something, didn't you? And chucked it around a few schools. Is that right?
Yeah, it was me and my co-founder Asha. We just like started in like Google Slides, because like we'd never really sort of thought this was going to be like a techie thing. We just worked in a couple of schools in Tottenham, where we lived at the time, and yeah, and it's grown into something. Yeah, especially as Rachel talks about, I'm like, oh wow, that's really cool, isn't it?
But I think for some of the people on this call, like there's a lot of us trying to sort of start things and do things a little bit differently. And I really love that thing that it started just as a set of Google Slides where you're like, maybe some teachers might want to use this in their classrooms, and you build from there. I think that spirit is something that we're trying to use in Citizen Collective, trying to sort of just start and see where it goes. I'd love there's a few questions in the chat that are a bit more kind of concrete, so I just want to call out some quick fire, like give us a little sense, like quick fire answer, like give us a little sense of how expensive this is, and where. Maybe I'll go Rachel with this. Like, is it expensive, and where does the school find the budget for it?
I don't personally, for what we get out of it, I don't think it's expensive, no. Sadly the way budgets are, but this is a priority for us, so we will always like make it work. And actually it's no more expensive than any kind of subscription you might have to things that you might possibly not use very often. And you know, we pay it, it's an annual payment, and then you've got that 12 months. It depends on obviously your school and things like that, and how many pupils and things. But again, Greg started kind of an advocate program as well, so there's opportunity to give back a little bit, and then you get a bit of a discount. So I don't think it's expensive, no.
There you go. Greg, give us a little flavour, and if there are parents or teachers on here who want to go and tell their schools, like, are they asking a huge amount of money, or what are they asking? What are they telling people to? This is.
You're asking for like £300 or £400 per year, and that's going to get every child involved in having a say. I think that's really important.
Nice. And the sort of amount that a PTA could maybe fundraise for or something like that. And I believe you're fairly open to getting things in. Give us and then another question from the chat was about Ofsted and like the case for this in those terms. Greg, is there anything you can say on that?
Yeah, Ofsted are well, we've been featured in many Ofsted reports positively, in some like really positively. They're also always a bit like careful about like endorsing things, Ofsted, but yeah, there's lots of Ofsted reports where we're featured in, particularly for sort of personal development stuff. We've been called out by name explicitly as a sort of really positive force in the school, so that's really helpful.
Nice. Okay. I wanted one last question before we go to give people a bit of a chance to chew and then come back with a few thoughts. So Tamsin, if you could be sort of starting to line up, sending people into breakouts. Nice thumbs, my amazing friend. We will. So the last question I just wanted to ask, maybe just for Greg, actually, for now, like what's the aspiration? Where does this go next? What's next for you? What's the dream? How do we take this everywhere?
Well, I mean, like, I think there's a couple of things I'd say. Firstly, like, please do shout about it if you know teachers, head teachers, people who work in multi-academy trusts or whoever, like, or if you're parents, please do spread the word, because it's not something we have like a giant marketing budget for, or a shiny CEO who's really good at selling it. But yeah, we really appreciate anyone who can spread the word, because I think it's really important. The other thing that I think we're looking at and developing more is, so those questions, those single questions that schools are discussing, what we're really interested in is if, for example, in a city or a region, if all the schools in that area could discuss that same question. So, for example, in the Northeast, in Newcastle, if 50 or 100 schools were discussing that same riots question, what could we do with that across a bigger place? I know you guys talk about place often, don't you? And how could we connect that with the people who really matter, the decision makers, elected representatives, like local mayors and that kind of thing? And that, I think, is really exciting, because it's very easy. It would be very easy, I think, for us to develop in a way where we can connect the people who really want to hear young people's views with discussions in hundreds, if not thousands, of classrooms. And yeah, so that's a big, interesting next step for me.
That's a beautiful image. Imagine if we had like the city of Newcastle, every primary school in not just Newcastle, Rachel, Gateshead, Sunderland, the whole northeast. Imagine if we had this in something like this in every school, and able to sort of make sure that the mayor of the northeast region could and that team could actually understand the conversations that are going on. I mean, that would be very powerful. Beautiful thought. With that beautiful thought, sorry, Tamsin, just thinking of you as an audience for this. Like
the thing that stops you as a parent, as an active parent, which I consider myself to be, is that whatever size of school, the resistance that you get is it's another thing that we have to do. They see it as a thing that they have to do. So how how did she position it within the school as a kind of a benefit that would solve other things they have to do, as opposed to being another task. Yeah, I did mention it to our deputy head a few years ago when I first heard about it, and she was like, "Well, we do a school council. We do a school council with one child from every class, and it's the same child. It's the child that will speak up." I love the fact that it's like teaching them the skills to feel they can input and feel they can have a voice in an environment. And I think this is a really interesting point, in an environment that, like, I was talking to my girls about it the other day, patron saints discussion happening in assembly, and at dinner, what Astra said to me, patron saints men. And I was like, "Did you ask that question at school?" And she was like, "No." And I was like, "Do you feel you could ask that question at school?" So I think the idea of them feeling that their voice is valid, and that they're not going to be told to, like, that's not on the curriculum, pipe down, is really important.
Welcome back, folks. I hope that wasn't too rude and drastic an interruption, and you can you've been able to have a chat with one another. What I'd love to do is just give someone from each group a quick chance just to give us a sort of 30-second sounding, or a question that was coming up for you, or something that was in your room, and we can then give Greg and Rachel a quick chance to share their final thoughts, and then Tamsin will give us a rundown of what's coming next, and we will send you off for the rest of your days. So who would like to take us first? I'm going to ask Steph French to say hello, because I haven't seen her for a very long time. She's an ally and a fellow traveller, and I want to hear what was going on in her room. Go on, Steph.
Thank you, John. Yeah, really interesting. We talked about lots of things in a short space of time, but ended up on collective learning, and the fact that the tendency in the culture at the moment for teachers to be expected to know everything, just like parents are expected to know everything once the children arrive, and we don't. It's a collective learning, and if the culture could change such that we could see school as that the teachers are learning together with the children, and change the culture all the way. And then the other quick thing to share is the question of whether I'm very interested in fractals, and whether this as a fractal could help to change the system further up by saying, this is how we want schools to be. We don't want them to be about learning facts and putting your hand up to ask to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful hack. Thank you for that. Beautifully done. Can we hear from another? Who would like to give us a flavour of one of the other rooms? Just come off mute and say hello. Don't be shy. Alison.
Hello. Hello. Well, I think what came out of our room was the importance of being as upstream as possible, with so many things across so many areas. I'm not a teacher, I'm a nurse by background. And I'm particularly sort of passionate about food as preventative medicine. And I think that that's something that, could be talked about in these sorts of forums. So many subjects, but the key message was getting upstream and embedding that mindset and those kind of attitudes and behaviours from a really early age. And the work that's been done is amazing.
Love it. Thank you so much. Jez, Shared Future.
I want to say we talked around lots of things, but we started talking about things like the Future Generations Act in Wales, and with the opportunities for sort of building that sense that young people are part of our future, and then how schools could become kind of social action in their own communities rather than being these sort of closed communities. So we had a lot of stuff about, whether schools are democratic, and whether the Smart School Council model is about how to embed a kind of education around democracy into our schools, so that we build those next generations of people who understand those values and aren't so prey to the negative populist messaging that is often out there.
Love it. Greg, there is a specific action point there. I'm doing some stuff with Derek Walker, the Future Generations Commissioner at the moment. So you need to send me an email to forward to him, and let's do some stuff. That sounds fun. Thank you, Jez. We've got 2 rooms we haven't heard from yet. Who'd like to give us a flavour of one of those? Who's reaching for their button?
I'll go from my background. There's a few,
Meg. Hello, Meg.
Loud. We spoke about how this affects intergenerational relationships, and also the ability of older people to feel like elders and to fulfill the role of elders that are maybe missing, but also the impact this might have on those children as they become elders. And then, as I want to do, I was just bringing up at the end about how we protect against or look clear-eyed at the mechanisms of misogyny and racism and ableism as they show up in collective spaces, and how those can be protected against. And, like, for example, in this example, how marginalised students could make sure that those mechanisms aren't playing out in a harmful way when we're hearing from every voice.
Interesting, thank you. Yeah, really important questions. We have one last group that I'd love to hear someone from.
Okay, John.
Thank you.
So we were discussing actually the ability, and Greg, you mentioned it before we went into breakout groups. Actually, I mean, we were all blown away by the tool on an individual basis, and want to lobby our own schools and kind of education systems. But I think there is so much opportunity in this tool to enable children and young people to influence policy issues on a much larger scale. We don't do well at involving children and young people in policy formation and decision making. Often it's quite tokenistic, if at all. And there are some really big policy issues at the moment. I put in the chat, like things like AI in education, where this is a really live issue where we are just not involving young people in a meaningful way. We might have a couple of focus groups, which I think all of us would agree are just not cutting it. So I'd love to talk to you outside of how we might kind of utilize and bridge decision makers with this type of tool, because I think it's really powerful, and just a huge well done and thank you, because this is exactly what our schools and our children need. So massively impressed.
Greg, I'm going to suggest, mate, that you put your email in the chat so that anyone who wants to follow up and be your sales advocates can get in touch. I'm actually going to suggest, I want to give Rachel our kind of closing word, but I'm going to come to Tamsin briefly now, just to give a little flavour of what's coming up, who else we've got coming to Smart School Councils, to Citizen closing word for us. So you can rabble-rouse us into our day, Rachel. Be prepared. What have we got, Tamsin?
Magic, John. We have a Luma page, which is basically our calendar of upcoming events. So we've got an event next Wednesday, which is our citizen workshop, where you can come along to a call like this, hosted by our lovely facilitators, Dave and Tanya. And they will be helping you work through some citizen challenges that you may be having. If you would like to find out more about the specifics of that, then I will drop an email after this to everybody. We also run a book club, for those of you that don't know. It's normally every 5 or 6 weeks. Our next one is coming up next Thursday in the evening. The book we are going to be talking about is Rob Hopkins' From What Is to What If, and having finished it last night, there is a lot in there about education, I can say, and like what if we changed the way in education was implemented. And I think Smart School Council should be up there. So and then our next spotlight call is also education themed. We are meeting the CAN team and After School Dinners Club organisation, who are bringing the idea of community-led events up in school spaces. So encouraging schools to open their doors beyond the school day by creating after dinner clubs. We will have some teachers on that call as well. We will have some students who are running those clubs themselves, and that is sure to be a great one.
10 o'clock, everyone's going to have to go, but Rachel, you need to have the last word. Just say something amazing and exciting. Go. She can't get off mute.
Okay, we're good. Thank you. Oh, it's pressure now. All I would say is I just look at my role, and I know Greg does too. We're duty bearers, so we have a duty to allow our young people to do something amazing in every conversation and every day. And I know that sounds like a lot of pressure, but it's so empowering. So go out into the world and be duty bearers for our young people and advocate for them, because they are the people who are going to change the world for us. So amen.
Amen to that. Okay, my friends, go forth in the day. Believe we can do this. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.